While anime has certainly carved a path of its own with each passing generation, who would have guessed that Disney helped influence the Ahegao face? If you've watched our video on the start of anime, you might know that anime has had a lot to owe to Disney's animation in the inspiration department. If we go back to anime's original roots, we'll find out that it began in the early 20th century, alongside the medium of animation in other nations. The oldest anime ever, a 2-minute film about a samurai warrior, appeared in Japanese theaters in 1917. A decade or so later, and the anime industry is already thriving. However, while Japanese animators were producing some notable feature-length films in the 1940s, it took anime around the post-war period to actually take off. It was in the late 1940s that one of Japan's most prolific and most important animators first rose to prominence. This is Osamu Tezuka. Tezuka was born in 1928 Japan, the eldest of 3 children. His father, an engineer, had a small passion for manga and had introduced his son to the medium through the collection that he had in the house. However, Tezuka's father would not only introduce him to manga, but also to Disney and Max Fleischer, 2 of his biggest inspirations, an exposure that would eventually lead Tezuka down the career path of animation in his distant future. Tezuka was, even now, known as a god of manga by fans of high work. That's because over the course of his career, he created more than 700 manga volumes, which totaled more than 150,000 pages. The work of Walt Disney would prove to be one of his strongest influences. Before Tezuka came on the scene, Japanese animators were producing short and even feature-length films as part of their production process, with some early notable films including Momotaro by Kitayama Saitaro, I probably fucked that up, in 1918, and Chikara to Anna no Yononoka, the first anime talkie, which appeared in 1932. Now, feel free to fact check me, because I probably butchered those names. While these were short films, they also signified the development of the animation medium in Japan before the war, inspired on the famous commercial success of Walt Disney's 1937 film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. People who thought animation wasn't worth it or had cast their doubts regarding its effectivity had these assumptions blown out of the water. You know why? Because they were fucking wrong. And this also inspired Japanese animators to begin making longer films. Anime was being used as a propaganda machine by the government during World War II era. The first feature-length anime film, Momotaro's Divine Sea Warriors, was one such propaganda piece. It was released in 1945. Osamu Tezuka adored Walt Disney as a child, who grew up in the 1930s and 1940s. He had supposedly watched Bambi more than 80 times. I mean, Bambi was definitely good, and I'm not a fan of Disney myself, though watching it 80 times will probably do a number on anybody's sanity. Tezuka was also a big fan of Dumbo and the Uncle Scrooge comics that had been drawn by Disney animator Carl Bark. Tezuka was a prodigious illustrator and storyteller from a very young age. When he had researched his second year in elementary school, he had begun drawing his own manga. During his teenage years, he unfortunately lost both of his arms due to an infection, which forced him to pursue medicine in college. However, he still kept up his manga drawing habit, and shortly after he entered college, he'd sell his first piece to an Osaka children's newspaper. The comic was simple, a 4-paneled series called Diary of Machan. The Diary of Machan was actually a hit, so Tezuka felt inspired to create another comic, which he called The New Treasure Island. This would be the first in a long line of Western-based adaptation comics for the aspiring author. He also professed an undying love for taking Western pieces and adding his own spin on them, adapting them to a more Eastern style. His adaptation of The Treasure Island would also serve as the tipping point in the national fame. Due to watching many of the animated full-length Disney feature films in his youth, Tezuka became the first anime artist to tell stories in a cinematic way. The inspiration he obtained from anime wasn't simply artistic choices or style, it was the storytelling, the masterful way Disney filmmakers narrate and convey feelings with every animated film. That's what helped kickstart anime as a medium altogether. Other artists had been simplistic and guideless in their storytelling, but Tezuka was one of the most emotional storytellers of all time. He wasn't afraid in the slightest to use many pages to explore one particular scene in detail, Comparing both Tezuka's and Walt Disney Studios' creations in the 1930s and 1940s, you could easily spot the similarities between their characters and the clear inspiration he obtained from Disney. Tezuka created all of his own characters and storylines, but he borrowed several traits from Disney characters and used them for anime instead. Tezuka borrowed the bold lines, round head, and large expressive eyes of Disney characters, making his own characters at once impossibly cute and extremely expressive. So, shout out to all the waifus. Using Disney's animation style also served two purposes for Tezuka. It helped him cut animation costs, which was essential given the time period of World War II, and also the struggling industry and lack of funding. It also ensured that his mangas and anime films never compromised on their emotional intensity and the messages behind them. The large eyes, which came to be regarded as an essential part of anime in modern day, allowed Tezuka's characters to express any emotion necessary in the scene. So there's a little bonus fact for you guys. What we know today as the classic anime eyes were actually inspired by Western animation. No matter how bad I might feel about Disney and how much I actually don't like Disney, it's an indisputable fact. Tezuka is noteworthy not only for changing the medium and giving it a new direction, but also inspiring legions of upcoming animators to do the same, and also begin working on telling original stories, even if their characters and some of their scenes somewhat resembled the trashy kind of Disney. Sometimes a little too much, but you know what? We love anime. Now that we can certainly confirm that Disney did influence anime at least in some sort, did the opposite also happen in a way? Could have anime influenced Disney somehow once it became a medium independent of its original roots? In the early 1950s, Osamu Tezuka wrote a manga series called Jungle Emperor, commonly translated to Kimba the White Lion in English. He made it into an animated television program in the 1960s. Remember the infamous Mufasa death scene from The Lion King? Well, many of Tezuka's fans were quick to point out that back in 1994, that there were many similarities between The Lion King and Kimba the White Lion, including the protagonist, several scenes, and many other characters. Anime films by the 1960s kicked off as a particularly famous and profitable niche. Osamu Tezuka is credited for having founded the anime genre, turning large heads and eyes, which were a big part of original Disney animations, a staple so synonymous with anime today that people forget that anime wasn't the one that came up with the concept of their character designs, even though some may disagree, including myself. This is just based on research. So, do you think Disney really influenced anime as much as we think today? Or do you think this is an exaggeration? No matter what your opinion is, let us know in the comments. Also, make sure to leave us a like or dislike if you hated it, because Disney kind of pains me too. Share this video with your friends, maybe just to make fun of me. And subscribe to our channel for more videos like this one. I've been broken obsessed in my otaku ways, and I will see all of you lovely people next time.